think my friend was struggling for her life. I think she was literally afraid for her life from what had been happening the last couple of weeks that led up to that DoorDash video. And there's just too much of past things that I do know, factual things that I've heard, and what I've heard in the last month this went on in the relationship. There has been issues. They were trying to separate, and this is red flags to me when the car was touched, period.
Sandra, I'm so sorry for what happened to your friend. It's just such a terrible situation. If you don't mind, just tell me first about the last time you saw Elena and kind of what stands out to you.
We went to brunch May the 31st. A couple girls, couple of her clients were there, friends I had known before. We all met up. Elena's like, loves a new place, loves to, kind of host something and get people together and people that's entrepreneurs, people like herself. So she invited me out, and when she showed up, she just looked really nervous. She wasn't calm. She was kind of looking around. She kind of got up once and walked to the door and was looking out the door. She wasn't fidgety or anything. I have a video from that day. I just kind of went around the table, and she was fine, as far as, she was in her right mind and everything like that. We all had brunch. We laughed. We talked. She was across the table from me. I had to go pick my son up. I hugged her bye. She hugged me, and she hugged me really tight. It was like, we've got to catch up one-on-one. There was still about 4 or 5 girls there. And she was like, I can't talk right now. But I'm scared for my life. It's a crazy shit right now. She said those words. And I said, what are you talking about? What? And she's like, you don't even know. She's like, it's too much right now in front of these people. We've got to, me and you one-on-one.
What makes a healthy 39-year-old woman walk away from her own life on foot, in the dark, and never come back? What makes her whisper to her closest friend, 11 days earlier, that she fears for her safety, then hug her tight and promise a conversation that never happens? And what makes a police department that spent a week insisting there was no sign of foul play suddenly hand the entire case to the most powerful investigative agency in the state the moment a body turns up in the trees? The internet has theories. The comment sections have verdicts. But theories are not evidence, and verdicts are not facts. Tonight, I'm going to strip this story down to what can actually be proven, what was said on the record, and what the official documents reveal, because when you line those pieces up in order, a picture emerges that almost nobody covering this case has shown you from beginning to end. Before we go any further, if stories like this matter to you, tap that like button and subscribe to True Crime Vic, because this channel exists to follow cases like this one past the headlines, and you won't want to miss where this investigation goes next. Her name was Elena Catherine Moore, 39 years old, a personal trainer at Wolf's Fitness Center in Lexington, South Carolina, a quiet suburb just west of Columbia. She also worked as a pharmacy technician at a local CVS, which tells you something about the kind of person she was. 2 jobs, 2 circles of people who saw her every week, clients who trusted her with their health and customers who knew her face at the counter. When police later described her disappearance, the phrase they reached for was that it was very out of character. Her friends went further. One of them, Sandra Campbell, had known her for more than a decade and described a woman who was positive, uplifting, someone she genuinely looked up to. Another friend, Lauren Beasley, told reporters that Elena was the kind of person who documented her world constantly, active online, present, engaged, which is exactly why the silence mattered. Roughly a month before she vanished, Elena stopped posting. Beasley noticed it immediately, and later said that going radio silent for that long was completely abnormal for her. The two of them had spoken around that same time, and according to Beasley, Elena gave no hint of trouble. Nothing about her marriage, nothing about work, nothing personal at all. Just an ordinary conversation, followed by weeks of unusual quiet. On its own, a lapse in social media activity means very little. People get busy, people step back, but hold on to that detail, because it's the first thread in a pattern, and the second thread arrives on the last day of May. May 31st, 2026. A brunch in Lexington. A group of women around a table, some of them Elena's clients, all of them expecting a normal Saturday. Sandra Campbell was there, and what she witnessed that morning would later become the emotional center of this entire case. She told reporters that something felt very different about her friend that day, and as the gathering wound down and Campbell got up to leave, Elena embraced her, held on, and said words no one ever expects to hear across a farewell hug. She was scared for her life. Campbell has repeated this account to multiple national outlets, insisting those were the exact words spoken to her. Elena wouldn't elaborate. Too many people around, she explained. It needed to be a private conversation. One-on-one later. Later never came. On June 4th, Campbell missed a call from Elena. She tried calling back. She sent texts. No response ever arrived. The two friends, close for over 10 years, the kind who told each other everything, had simply run out of time, and neither of them knew it. Now, here's where this case takes its first genuinely strange turn, because June 4th, the very day of that missed call, is also the day Elena appeared on a doorbell camera at an apartment complex she had no connection to. A couple named John Moore, no relation to Elena, and Sarah Burleson lived there. That afternoon, a delivery driver dropped a food order outside their door. Moments later, Elena walked up and collected it, as though it belonged to her. When John Moore opened his door to retrieve his food, she reportedly tried to follow him inside his home. He later told a local NBC affiliate that she seemed genuinely disoriented, unsure of where she was or what she was doing there. About an hour afterward, Burleson encountered her again, this time looking through packages outside a different neighbor's unit. Asked what she was doing, Elena allegedly answered that she had no idea. Burleson would later voice the question that haunts this whole timeline. If Elena was that confused a week before she went missing, was she in that same state on the night she disappeared? According to Sandra Campbell's account, that incident ended with Elena being taken to a hospital, and from there, she says, to a mental health facility in the area. Campbell has been careful to note that any stay there ended because Elena left of her own accord. I want to be precise about sourcing here. That claim comes from a friend's interview, not from any official release. But an incident report obtained by a national news outlet adds a remarkable piece of corroboration. According to that document, someone arranged a taxi for Elena following her release. During the ride, she asked the driver to stop at a CVS in Lexington. She went inside. She never came back out to the cab. The driver waited, then entered the store to look for her, and couldn't find her anywhere. Think about what that means. Days before the disappearance that made national news, Elena Moore had already slipped away from someone once, quietly, in the middle of an ordinary errand. Campbell, for her part, has pushed back hard against the idea that her friend was simply in the grip of a breakdown. She acknowledged Elena dealt with anxiety, something they'd been open about with each other, but insisted that the narrative of mental collapse didn't fit the woman. She knew. She loved her life, Campbell said. To her, the explanation being floated just didn't make sense. So the stage is set. A month of silence. A whispered warning at brunch. A day of documented confusion. A hospital, a facility, a taxi, a vanishing act inside a pharmacy. And then, 1 week later, the night everything stops. June 11th, 2026. Elena arrives at the Planet Fitness on Whiteford Way, a gym she visited regularly. She signs in at roughly 6:40 in the evening. For more than 2 hours, she's inside, and there is nothing in the public record suggesting anything unusual happened during that workout. Then she walks out. Surveillance footage captures her leaving on foot, moving toward a wooded area behind a nearby Lowe's home improvement store. Later video, released by police days afterward, shows her crossing the parking lot of a Publix grocery store at 9:17 that night, heading in the direction of Old Cherokee Road, wearing an olive green zip-up hoodie and black athletic pants. No car. Investigators couldn't even confirm whether she had her cell phone. That grainy figure crossing an empty parking lot is the last confirmed sighting of Elena Moore alive. The next day, June 12th, her husband reported her missing. His name is Brannon Slice, and according to local reporting, he was the one who discovered her vehicle sitting in the Lowe's parking lot. Police have stated, clearly and repeatedly, that Slice is not a person of interest. He has not been accused of any wrongdoing, and no one has been charged with any crime in connection with this case. Keep that firmly in mind, because everything you're about to hear has to be weighed against it. The search that followed was extensive. Drones over the tree line. Officers moving through the woods behind the shopping centre. On June 15th, multiple agencies conducted a detailed sweep of that terrain, and Police Chief Terence Green went out of his way to frame it carefully, saying it was not a recovery operation, but a precise effort to rule out one more place she could be. No trace of her was found. Through all of it, the department maintained there was no indication of foul play. A private investigation firm offered a $1,500 reward for information. Days passed. Nothing. Then, June 17th, a tip comes in. One that Chief Green later credited in part to the media attention surrounding the case. It points investigators toward a wooded area near Lakeside Middle School, roughly 2 miles from the gym. That Wednesday afternoon, at approximately 2:48, searchers find a body. The clothing matches: olive green hoodie, black athletic pants. 2 days later, the Lexington County Coroner's Office confirms the identification. The search for Elena Moore is over. And here is the moment that changed how the entire country looked at this case. The same department that had spent a week saying there was no evidence of foul play immediately requested that the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the state's elite investigative agency, take over the death investigation. Now, to be fair, bringing in SLED for an unexplained death is not an admission of anything. It can be standard procedure, a way of ensuring independence and resources. But for a public already asking questions, it landed like a thunderclap, because the questions had already started, and they centered on the weeks before, and on the marriage. Elena and Brannon Slice had been together for more than 13 years. They married in 2024. From the outside, a long relationship finally made official. But Sondra Campbell has told national interviewers a different story about the inside. According to her, there had been ongoing problems, and the couple was trying to separate. She called it a red flag, and she has said she believes there was more to her friend's death than a woman simply walking into the woods. She described witnessing how Slice spoke to Elena, recalled an expensive concert the two women skipped because, in her telling, Elena couldn't face being around him that night, and alleged a dynamic in which Elena was made to feel isolated, as if her husband was all she had. Those are one friend's allegations, and they don't stand entirely alone. Another friend, Aston Jeffcoat, shared a Facebook message with a national outlet dating back to 2017, in which Elena wrote that she wanted to move out and leave the man who is now her husband. Lauren Beasley described it as a cycle, years of Elena expressing that she wanted to end the relationship, then staying, then wavering again, saying she didn't know what to do. But there is a forceful counter-narrative, and you deserve to hear it with equal weight. A private investigator named Dukes, who has worked on this case and spoken with Slice directly, has publicly rejected the suggestion of a troubled marriage, saying he observed no tension and found absolutely no red flags. He described a husband who wanted to do everything possible to find his wife, a man who was distraught during the search and grieving after it ended, someone who had built a life with Elena and planned to spend the rest of it with her. When Campbell's claims aired, Dukes dismissed them bluntly, arguing that she had no factual information to offer investigators. Campbell has said she confronted him directly over that, telling him he never spoke to her before declaring the marriage was fine. A former FBI agent who reviewed the public evidence added another sobering point. Elena's phone wasn't pinging when she entered those woods. Cameras covered the area, and no footage shows anyone following her in. In that agent's assessment, leaping to a conclusion of homicide, let alone naming a culprit, simply isn't supported by anything released so far. There were, however, moments during the search that fueled public frustration. In a Facebook post that has since been deleted, Slice reportedly wrote that his wife was not well. Then, while the search was still active, he posted a photo that turned out to have been taken weeks earlier, and when confusion erupted, he apologized in a comment, explaining the timing of the image. Commenters demanded he focus on raising awareness instead. Was any of that suspicious? Or was it simply a man handling an unimaginable week imperfectly, in public, while strangers watched? The honest answer is that nobody outside this investigation knows, and pretending otherwise would be exactly the kind of speculation this channel refuses to traffic in. Then, at the end of June, came a revelation about the past. An investigative outlet in South Carolina obtained internal affairs records through a public records request, and those documents showed that back in 2013, Slice was a narcotics detective with the county sheriff's department when an internal investigation was opened into his personal associations connected to a drug case he had worked. The records indicate he resigned before that probe concluded, faced a misconduct charge, and was ultimately stripped of his law enforcement certification. Today, he's listed as a private investigator for a law office in Lexington. And once more, for the record, those documents concern events from over a decade ago, and authorities have not referenced him in any capacity in connection with his wife's death. Which brings us to the finding that deepened this mystery instead of resolving it. On June 20th, a forensic autopsy was performed at the Medical University of South Carolina. 2 days later, the county coroner announced the results, and they stunned everyone following the case. No bruising, no balium lacerations, no gunshot or stab wounds, no blunt force trauma, no strangulation, no external injuries of any kind. A woman tells her best friend she fears for her life, disappears 11 days later, is found dead in the woods, and her body carries not a single visible mark of violence. Toxicology testing and a review of her medical history are still pending, and until those come back, the cause of her death remains officially unknown. So sit with the full weight of this timeline. A month of uncharacteristic silence, a terrified whisper at a farewell hug, a documented episode of confusion at a stranger's door, a hospital, a reported facility stay, a taxi she stepped out of and never returned to, a final workout, a walk toward the trees, and a body with no wounds. Every fact points somewhere, and yet no two people watching this case seem to agree on where. In the second part of this story, I'll take you inside what happened after the identification, the toxicology question, the competing theories being tested against the evidence, and the voices still fighting over who Elena Moore really was in her final days. If you want the answers as they emerge, verified and stripped of rumor, make sure you like this video and subscribe to True Crime Vic with notifications on, because this case is far from finished, and neither am I. How does a woman walk more than a mile through a busy commercial district, past cameras, past storefronts, past passing headlights, and still managed to vanish so completely that hundreds of trained searchers can't find a trace of her for 6 days. How does a body finally emerge from the trees carrying no wounds, no bruises, no marks of any struggle, and somehow leave investigators with fewer answers than they had before? And why, 3 weeks after that discovery, is the most advanced forensic system in South Carolina still unable to tell the public how Elena Moore died? Everyone covering this case has an opinion. Almost no one has done the work of separating what the record actually shows from what the rumor mill has manufactured. In this second part, I'm going to walk you through her final documented night, step by step, take you inside the search, confront the accusation the whole internet keeps circling, and show you exactly where the official investigation stands right now. Because the truth of this story lives in details most coverage has skipped entirely. If you haven't watched part 1, it's on the channel. And if you're new here, hit that like button and subscribe to True Crime Vic right now, because when the toxicology results drop, this is where you'll hear them broken down properly. Let's return to June 11th. And this time, let's move through it slowly. At 6:40 in the evening, Elena signs into the Planet Fitness on Whiteford Way, a location she visited so often the staff knew her routine. For a professional trainer, a session stretching past 2 hours raised no eyebrows. Somewhere around 9, she walks out into the summer dark. Her car isn't waiting for her. Nobody picks her up. Surveillance captures her moving away from the building on foot toward the tree line behind the neighboring Lowe's home improvement store. 17 minutes past 9. Another camera finds her again, this time crossing the Publix parking lot at 100 Old Cherokee Road, still in that olive green zip-up hoodie, still in the black athletic pants, walking steadily in the direction of Old Cherokee Road itself. Trace that route on a map, and you realize what it represents. From the gym, past the home improvement store, along a corridor of shops and businesses, all the way to a grocery store parking lot, well over a mile covered alone at night. Beyond that final frame lies a quieter stretch of road, a middle school, a creek threading through dense woods. Whether she had her phone with her, investigators could never confirm. What's certain is that after 9 to 17, no camera, no witness, no verified sighting places Elena Moore anywhere on this earth again. The following day, her husband, Brannon Slice, contacted the Lexington Police Department and reported her missing. According to local reporting, he was the one who located her vehicle sitting in the Lowe's parking lot. And let me restate what the authorities themselves have said on the record, plainly and more than once, because it frames everything that follows. Slice is not a person of interest. He has been described as cooperating with investigators. Nobody in this case has been accused of wrongdoing, and nobody has been charged with any crime. The search machinery spun up fast. A drone went over the woods behind the gym that first weekend and came back with nothing. Then, on Monday, June 15th, the operation expanded into something the town of Lexington had rarely seen. Officers from the police department were joined by the county sheriff's office, state law enforcement, natural resources personnel, and emergency services, all of them combing the terrain behind that shopping corridor piece by piece. Chief Terence Green chose his words deliberately, telling the public this was not a recovery mission, but a methodical effort to eliminate one location where she might be. When it ended, his statement was blunt. No trace of her had been found. Meanwhile, the community's nerves were fraying, and then came a moment that made everything worse. Word spread across social media, suggesting Elena had been located. For a few hours, people allowed themselves relief. Then the claim collapsed. Police confirmed the reports were untrue, and she remained missing. Frustration curdled into anger, and much of it found a target online, aimed at her husband whose digital behavior during the search had already drawn scrutiny. In a post that was later deleted, Slice reportedly described his wife as not well. Separately, he shared a photograph that turned out to have been taken weeks before she vanished. And when confused commenters flooded in, he apologized beneath it and clarified when the image was captured. Strangers demanded he do more, post more, plead more. Whether any of that reflects something meaningful or simply a private man navigating a public catastrophe badly is not something you or I can determine, and I won't pretend otherwise. On June 16th, police released the public's footage, along with doorbell images from the strange apartment complex episode 12 days earlier, and a private investigation firm announced a $1,500 reward. Chief Green would later say, "The wave of media attention helped produce what came next." A resident contacted authorities reporting they had seen Elena entering the wooded area near Lakeside Middle School, close to where North Lake Drive meets Old Cherokee Road, on the very night she disappeared. That single call redrew the entire search map. Wednesday, June 17th, early afternoon. Officers and fire personnel begin working through the trees off Old Cherokee Road, roughly 2 miles from the gym, terrain threaded by a creek. At approximately 2:48, they stop. A body, female, unidentified, wearing an olive green zip-up hoodie and black athletic pants. Chief Green stood before cameras that evening and confirmed searchers had found remains matching the clothing description of their missing person, with formal identification still to come. 2 days later, on Friday, June 19th, Coroner Margaret Fisher's office confirmed what everyone already feared. It was Elena. That same week, the Lexington Police Department and the County Sheriff's Office formally requested that the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division take over the death investigation. Now, I want to handle this development honestly, because plenty of commentators have treated it as a smoking gun. SLED's own statement described the request in procedural terms, saying it was asked to conduct a death investigation after a deceased individual was found during a missing person search. Agencies hand cases like this to the State Division precisely because it brings resources, forensic capability, and independence that a town department cannot match. What SLED's involvement genuinely means is this: the most capable investigators in South Carolina now control the answer to what happened in those woods, with access to every camera, every record, every witness. Whatever the truth is, they are the ones positioned to reach it. Which brings us to the question flooding every comment section since the first missing poster went up. And I'm going to address it directly, rather than let it hover unspoken. Did her husband have anything to do with this? Start with the official record. Police have repeatedly stated Slice is not a person of interest, and earlier in the search, they said they had no indication of foul play whatsoever. The investigator working alongside the family, a man named Dukes, described a husband who was distraught, desperate to help, grieving a woman he intended to grow old with. Set beside that, the accounts of her friends. Sondra Campbell has alleged the marriage was deeply troubled, that the couple was moving toward separation, that Elena skipped an expensive concert rather than spend the evening near him, and that her friend was made to feel her husband was all she had in the world. A message shared with a national outlet by another friend, Aston Jeffcoat, showed Elena writing back in 2017 that she wanted to move out and end the relationship. Lauren Beasley remembered a recurring cycle stretching across years, wanting to leave, then staying, then wavering, never quite knowing what to do. When Dukes went on television and characterized the marriage as free of tension, Campbell phoned him and challenged him directly, pointing out he had never interviewed her before making that declaration. He fired back publicly, insisting she possessed no factual information for investigators and should stay out of the case. 2 irreconcilable portraits of one relationship argued in front of the entire country. Then a trained outside voice entered the conversation. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a former FBI agent analyzing the case for national media, examined what had actually been released and delivered an assessment that deserves your full attention. Her cell phone wasn't pinging when she entered that wooded area, cameras covered the surroundings, and no footage shows anyone following her in. On that basis, Coffindaffer called it a major leap to claim anyone walked into those trees and committed a homicide. But she added something just as valuable. The competing explanations aren't mutually exclusive. A person can be experiencing a genuine psychological crisis and simultaneously be living inside a strained, frightening marriage. Both realities can coexist, and treating this as an either-or question may be the biggest mistake the public conversation has made. At the end of June, an investigative outlet in the state added a documented chapter from the distant past. Through a public records request, it obtained internal affairs files showing that in 2013, when Slice was a narcotics detective with the county sheriff's department, an inquiry was opened into his personal associations connected to a drug case he had worked. The paperwork indicates he resigned before the probe concluded, faced a misconduct charge afterward, and was ultimately stripped of his law enforcement certification by the state's training council. Today, records list him as a private investigator attached to a Lexington law office. Those findings describe events from 13 years ago. They establish nothing about June of 2026, and authorities have never referenced him in any capacity regarding his wife's death. I'm sharing them because they're part of the documented public picture of this case. And this channel doesn't curate the record to fit a narrative in either direction. Because here's the thing, many people watching expected the autopsy to settle all of this. Instead, it detonated the entire framework. The examination was performed on Saturday, June 20th, at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. On Monday the 22nd, Coroner Fisher released preliminary findings that stunned everyone following along. There was no evidence of traumatic injury anywhere on Elena's body. No bruising. No beryllium lacerations, no beryllium gunshot wound, no beryllium stab wound, no blunt force trauma, no strangulation, nothing external at all. A 39-year-old fitness professional found deceased in the woods after telling her best friend she feared for her safety, and the forensic pathologists could identify no immediate cause of death whatsoever. Understand what that finding does and doesn't accomplish. It makes certain violent scenarios far harder to sustain. It does not, by itself, rule anything in or out, because natural causes, accident, overdose and poisoning, can all leave a body externally unmarked. The determination now rests on 3 pending pillars: microscopic tissue analysis, a review of her complete medical history, and toxicology, the chemistry of whatever was or wasn't in her system that night. At the start of July, with speculation boiling online about why answers were taking so long, Fisher gave a rare interview to a Colombian news station to explain the silence. While she couldn't discuss specifics of this case, she made clear that a pending classification doesn't mean anything has stalled. Her office, she explained, refuses to rush or skip a single step, and the science involved is inherently slow, layered, and painstaking. In other words, the wait isn't a failure of the process. The wait is the process working. So the case now stands at a fork, with 2 very different roads. Down one, the laboratory results reveal something that transforms this into a criminal matter, and the state's death investigation becomes something far more consequential. One where every person connected to Elena's final weeks faces a completely new level of scrutiny. Down the other, the findings point toward a medical event or a crisis, and this becomes a different devastation altogether. The story of a woman whose warning signs were visible to those closest to her, whose confusion was captured on a doorbell camera, and whose final walk into the dark was a tragedy nobody managed to interrupt. Neither outcome returns her to the people who loved her. And if the evidence ultimately clears her husband entirely, then honesty requires acknowledging he will have endured 2 ordeals at once: the loss of his wife and a global audience, presuming his guilt while he buried her. Yet one fact refuses to be filed away under any theory, and it anchors this whole case. 11 days before her death, Elena told a friend of more than a decade that she feared for her life. Whatever the laboratory eventually concludes, someone still has to explain those words, what prompted them, who or what she meant, and why the person who spoke them ended up dead in a stand of trees off a quiet road. There's a wider truth in her story too, and it's worth saying out loud. When someone becomes gradually cut off from the people around them, the friends who would notice a change lose their line of sight, and research on troubled relationships consistently shows the window around a separation carries the greatest danger. Sandra Campbell noticed. She heard the warning at that farewell embrace. She intended to follow up, missed one call on June 4th, and never got another chance. That's not her failure. It's a measure of how narrow these windows can be, and how much it matters to push past a friend's promise of later. Elena Moore trained bodies at a local fitness centre, worked a pharmacy counter, and became someone half of Lexington recognized. Her clients trusted her. Her friends called her uplifting, the kind of person others leaned on. She deserved a long life, and failing that, she deserves a complete answer. The toxicology report is coming. The state's investigators are still working, and whichever direction the evidence takes this case, I'll bring it to you the moment it lands, verified, sourced, and free of the noise. If this two-part investigation gave you a clearer picture than the headlines did, show it with a like, subscribe to True Crime Vic, and turn on notifications, because Elena's story isn't over, and neither is our commitment to following it wherever it leads.